Oh yeah.
All right. Good evening. Daf Yomi is continued to be a sponsor for this week by Shmuley and Miriam Fuchs, Lili Nishmas Shmuley's mother, Bela Yentel Bas Elchanan Ala Shalom.
I'm sponsoring for JD today.
Okay. And her Neshama Shev and Aliyah, and then we are going to.
Before Shlema for our good friend Jeff.
Right, we have a good for right. We're going to have Jeff. Before Shlema for Jeff, but by sponsored by Yehuda. Okay, very good. Okay, so we are at the two dots. About 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines down. Tana Rabbana. No, sorry, 10 lines. 10 lines down from the quote of the Mishnah. Kol sheyesh lo matirin. The Mishnah says any object which has something else make it permitted. Right? So then, bein la'adam, bein la'mizbeach, whether the permissible now is for a person to eat it, or it's permissible to burn it on the mizbeach, chayavin ala mishum pigul, you can be liable for pigul if you consume that object now. You consume that meat or the fats or whatever it is that you're doing. Tana Rabban Rabbi's word. O enu mevi ella kayote bashlamim. So the Brisa says that from this pasuk, the pasuk says that we had quoted a couple of times before, Vayinazru mikadshei b'nei Yisrael, they should separate from the holy objects of the Bnei Yisrael. So that comes to tell us that this rule of pigul applies to all of the kadshim of Bnei Yisrael. Right? That's the pasuk is telling us. So the Gemara wants to know, eino mevi ela kayotzi b'shlamim, or maybe since the Torah talks about pigul by a shlamim, that's the source for it. Maybe it only applies to the to korbanos that are like a shlamim. In what way? Ma shlamim miyuchadim ne'echol l'shnei yamim v'layla echad. So just like shlamim are eaten for 2 days and one night, the night in the middle of it. So then af kol ne'echol l'shnei yamim v'layla echad. So then it only comes to pigul would only apply to those korbanos that are eaten for 2 days and over one night, right? Well, that's going to exclude some of the other korbanos that we've been discussing, like the chatos and some of these other ones, the korban pesach, right? Not an issue. Then, so the nechol yom v'layla minayin. How do I know to include those korbanos that are only eaten for 1 day and one night? Talmud Lomer, the pasuk continues on and it says, mi basar, from the meat. Right, this is the pasuk. Where's the whole pasuk? This is the whole pasuk that has to do with pigul. It says that if a person will eat from the meat of the zevach of his shlamim, as we said, that's the source is the shlamim. Bayom hashlishi, on the third day, meaning he has in mind that he's going to eat on the third day, lo yiratzeh, it will not be admissible. Hamakriv also for the person who is bringing it, velo yechashev lo pigul yiyah, it will be pigul. Okay, so that's what the pasuk says, and in there, where's the word basar? Yeah, from the fourth word there. So therefore, it's coming to include korbanos that are not exactly like the shlamim. Kol shirin necholin. So he says, okay, so that's going to include all of those korbanos. Anything which is going to be eaten, kol sheshirin necholin, korban that you eat the meat. Ola she'ein shireha necholin, but what are you going to do about the korban ola? The korban ola, which doesn't get eaten, doesn't get consumed at all, minayin, what's the source that pigul applies to that korban as well? Talmud Lomer, therefore the pasuk says, zevach, the sacrifice. Well, that implies all of them. Minayin, so that's going to include all of those, all sacrifices. So good, we've gone through all the animal sacrifices, all of them apply. Minayin l'rabos ha'ofos v'hamenachos. So where are you going to include bird sacrifices? And how are you going to include also the meal offerings? Ad shani merabe log shemen shel mitzora. All the way I've got to get to the point where I'm going to include even consuming the lug shemen, the oil that is brought by the person who has tzaras. Talmud Lomer, the pasuk says, "Asher heim makdishim li," that they are kodesh to me. That is that's in a separate pasuk which says, That's in Vayikra Chaf Beis. Remember when we were talking about the sources for Pigul a couple weeks ago, right? We had two psukim. This one says, Daber al Aaron vel banav, v'yanazur mekodshei Yisrael, separate from the kodshim of Bnei Yisrael, v'lo yechalu Hashem kodshi, and you will not desecrate my name, asher he makdishim li, that which is holy to me, ani Hashem. So therefore, that which is holy to me, that includes all of these items which are part of korbanos, right? Even if they're not animal sacrifice as such. The asi nosar. Now we should come to learn also that the prohibition of nosar, chilu mituma. So why don't we learn it like this? Why do we have to learn why do we have to learn it through all of those things? Why don't we learn that the prohibition of nosar, that it applies to all korbanos? So that's Gzeira Shava from Chil Mituma, right? We have the word by Tuma. It says V'ochlav, somebody who eats the korban, that while it's tamei, avono yisa. So we said that if you are a tahor person who eats a tamei korban, you're a chayv alosase, right? Yesterday we were talking about if the person was tamei, he's chayv kares, right? So this says ve'ochlav, if you eat it, so that avono yisa, ki es kodesh Hashem chilel, because he has profaned the offering of Hashem. So then it says that is by nosar, and then by what do you call it? By tuma, it says ve'inazur mekodshei Yisrael v'lo yechalu Hashem kodshi. So, just like by Tuma applies to all Kodshim, so too, Nosar applies to all of Kodshim. Okay, then, if that is true, now we know that Nosar applies to all Korbanos, Ase Pigol Avon Minosar. Why do we need to learn all of these details about all the different words that we just used in order to learn Pigol? We have Gzeira Shava that compares Nosar to Pigol. Because the Pasuk says, V'ochlav avono yisa, somebody who eats it, right? But by nosar it says anybody who eats it will be in violation of his avera, and by pigul it says v'nefesh ha'ochelas mimenu avon tisa, nefesh that eats it, he will carry his avera. So it says avon, each in both places. So therefore, nosar and pigul have the same rules, should be applying to all korbanos. So the Brisa goes back and clarifies. Called davar, or I guess this is the second. This is just to tell you there's a second limud, right? They paused in the middle of the Brisa. That was happening. The Brisa was telling us, went through each thing. Then they paused in the middle and said, the Gemara says, there's also another way to learn that pigul applies to all korbanos. So we now have two versions. One is through the psukim, one is through the Gzeira Shava. So, back into the Brisa. Now, at the end of the day, all korbanos are included in pigul. Lama nemar shlamim me'ata. So then if that is the case, why is the source shlamim? Just don't write shlamim. Just say it's a general rule by all korbanos. So the answer is lomar lachas, to teach you. Ma shlamim yuchadim sheish lamatirin bein la'adam bein l'mizbeach. Just like shlamim, it has parts of it that you are going to activate other parts, right? You sprinkle the blood in order to permit other elements of the sacrifice from being eaten or from being burned. So af kol sheyishal matirin bein ladam le'lezbeach chayav l'mishim pigul. So that's the rule. You need to have a item which has been activated by a different service in order for it to be liable for eating and consuming of pigul. Okay. So now we're going to go into detail and explain. Ha'ola, when it comes to the ola, korban ola, dama matir es bisara l'mizbeach. The sprinkling of the blood of the korban ola permits you to burn the meat on the mizbeach. Ve'ora lekohanim, and also it allows the skin to go to the kohanim. Ola sa'of, the bird offering of the oaf, dama matir es bisara l'mizbeach. So that's going to permit the blood is going to permit the rest of the bird to be burned on the mizbeach. Chata sa'of, the sin offering of the bird, dama matir bisara lekohanim. The blood is going to permit the meat to be eaten by the kohanim. Parim hanisrafim usirim hanisrafim. The bulls and the goats that are burned on the blood is that are burned, meaning their blood is sprinkled on the inside of the Beis Hamikdash. Damam matir es imurehem likarev. The sprinkling of the blood allows you to take their inner fats and burn those on the mizbeach. Umotziani es hakometz. You know which ones do not get included? The ones in our Mishnah, right? Not the kmitza, not the levona, not the frankincense. V'aktoros, not the spices, right? Uminchas kohanim, the kohanim. There's nothing to be eaten in there either. Uminchas koi mashiach, uminchas nesachim, and the libation. What do you call it? They call them libations, right? That's wine, right? Libation mincha, the wine and oil that gets brought together. V'hadam, and the blood itself. So those are not consumed, and so therefore they're not permissible. They're not permitted. There's no permitter for them. They're not pigul if you consume those items. Okay, Rabbi Shimon Omer. Rabbi Shimon says, I'll tell you why it's compared to a shlamim. Ma shlamim miyuchodim sheyesh bo al gabe mizbeach hachitzon. Just like the shlamim has the blood applications on the outer mizbeach, v'chayav and alav, and then you get to be in violation of pigul. Af kol sheyeshin al gabe mizbeach hachitzon chayav lo mishpigul. Therefore, pigul only applies to those sacrifices that have the blood sprinkled outside. That's why in the Mishnah, if you remember yesterday, Rabbi Shimon has this opinion that the inner korbanos are not eligible for pigul because they're not like the shlamim. So yatsu param and israfim l'sirun israfim. It's going to exclude the bulls and the goats that are burned. Whole she'ein al mizbeach hachitzon kishlamim, because their blood applications are not done on the outer mizbeach like a shlamim, and chayav and alav mishum pigul. So you're not liable for pigul because of them. Okay.
So the inner mizbeach, that wasn't for like edible korbanos. Like
no korban was brought on the inside and was edible. Correct. Because the only ones that were all these chatos offerings that their whole bodies were completely burned afterwards.
And I don't want to get too much off track, but the inner mizbeach, that would have been like here, like in the heichel.
That's the one. Correct.
Okay. All right.
That's the one.
All right.
That's where we're talking about putting the blood. Okay, good. Now let's discuss this brisa. Amar Mar.
No, nothing is actually burnt on that inner mizbeach.
No,
Only put the blood on it.
you put the blood on it. Then you take the emurim on the outer mizbeach, and then you take the rest of the animal and you bring it outside into a separate place and burn that. Okay. So the brisa says, right? So. Kayotze bashlamim, right? Maybe first we said, let's include everything. Then we said, you know what? It says shlamim. It has to be something similar to shlamim. So my nihu. So let's talk about first. Which korban are we talking about? When in the beginning we said the korbanos that you can eat for 2 days and 1 night. Which ones are those that are similar to a shlamim? The bechor, right? The firstborn offering. Bechor, firstborn animal, when it has no blemish, is brought to the Kohen. The Kohen brings it as a korban. It can be eaten for 2 days and 1 night, like a shlamim. So, b'mai asi. Okay, so how would we What's the limud? What's the learning from shlamim to bechor? I b'mematzinu. Is it what we call a mematzinu? Meaning that we have a korban shlamim. It's eaten for 2 days and 1 night. Therefore, we now know that is the rule by all korbanos that are eaten for 2 days and 1 night. That's the process of mematzinu. This is the rule, so all things that fit in that same category apply to the same rule. So ikala meifrach, you can say, but there's differences between a bechor and a shlamim. It's not the same rule that you're applying. Ma shlamim hein te'un smicha nesachim t'nuvas chazev v'shok. The shlamim has many other parts to the shlamim. You have to lean on the shlamim. You have to bring the wine libations. You have to wave the parts of the meat. I'm just going to grab a tissue. Sorry.
It's different, right? Rashi's like,
right. So, therefore, you can't learn a mematzino. You can't say that a bechor and a shlamim are in the same category, that the same laws would apply. Ella, so rather, you have to say, im he'achol ye'achel. You're going to go from the pasuk, because the pasuk, remember, we were using this pasuk, we used every other word. The double language, he'achol ye'achel, is telling me that is the general, that's the klal, right? Then comes the word shlamim. Shlamim is the prat. Okay, so now we've got a klalu prat, and then we have ye'achel again, which is another klal. He'achol, right, and ye'achel are the klal, and then you've got a prat, a detail, which is the shlamim. Now, therefore, we have the rule. Klal uprat uklal. How does a klal uprat uklal work? The generalization specific and then a generalization. You rule according to everything that is similar to the item in specific. How does that work? here's an example, right? I'm going to buy a car, a Corvette, or any sports car. So now, my generality was my car. In the end, any sports car is a generality too. My Corvette in the middle, or I say, or any other, right? But my Corvette in the middle tells me that I want a Corvette. So now I've got to say, what is it about a Corvette? It is a sports car that is from Chevrolet. So therefore, all sports cars from Chevrolet are now the cars that I am going to purchase.
And it's interior.
Okay, so that whatever the rules and whatever the similarities are, right? So I'm going to include all things, right? So so now that is how the klal uprat uklal works. However, the problem with our rule is that it's supposed to be a klal and then a prat and then a klal, right? And this says Heachol Yeachel Shlomov. This is the klal, this is the klal, this is the prat. In order for it to be a klal, prat, a klal, you need the klal and then the prat in the middle and then the klal. How are you, right? This is in the wrong place. These are supposed to be flipped. That's a problem, right? If this is supposed to work. Honey trei klali dismichi adadininu. The two klalim are next to each other in the pasuk. That's not supposed to be. So Amar Rava says, Kedamri Amar Rava, we said in Eretz Yisrael, Kol mokum shatem motzi shnei klalim sasmuchim zeh lazeh. If you see Heachol and Yechel, two klalim next to each other, hatel prat beinim. Just put the prat in the middle. That's okay. Don't worry about that. That works. The dunam bechal prat, and you're going to consider it like a klal prat. It's going to be fine, right? Don't be bothered by the fact that you put those two things together. Okay, so now the Gemara goes on and it says habasar, which included the other korbanos. And then we went in and we said we added more, and we added the ola. We had all, from the word zevach. Okay, good. Then we said, how am I going to include all of the other things that get brought? Ad she'ani marbel lug shemen shel mitzorah. Until I'm going to include also the consumption of the lug of oil of the mitzorah. So Hamani, whose opinion is this? That the lug shemen of oil is pigul, right? So who says that? Rabbi Meir. That's Rabbi Meir's opinion. Detanya, as we learn in another brisa, log shemen shel mitzorah, the log shemen of the mitzorah, alav chayavin alav misham pigul. You're going to be liable to pigul for that korban. Divrei Rabbi Meir, according to Rabbi Meir, not for the korban, for consuming that lug of oil. Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's what Rabbi Meir says. Okay, so that means that it is right. Why? Because he holds that. At what point do you become permitted to consume that oil? When you bring the blood of the Asham. Therefore, it's a davar sheish matirim, right? The blood of the Asham now permits the lug of oil, and so therefore that is a permitter. Yeah, but now ema seifa. Now let's go back to the brisa. The brisa says, "Umotzeni minchas nesachim v'adam asan l'rabanan." But then he says, you know which ones don't have pigul? We said the wine and the libations and the blood. Well, that's the Rabbanon, because the Rabbanon, Rabbi Meir thought that there's no right. Rabbi Meir holds there is pigul by those nesachim as well. In our Mishnah, he makes that very clear. So if we're switching over to say that there's no pigul by the nesachim, so then this is the Rabbanan's point of view. So how do we start with with Rabbi Meir and then switch to the Chachamim? Detanya, we learn in a brisa. Niske behema chayavin alehem. So if you have a korban, right, the Torah will tell you that you're supposed to bring a certain amount of oil with it, a certain amount of wine with it. Okay, so if you bring the animal, right, and then the blood is sprinkled, that makes those items ready there to be consumed. If you eat those items, the blood or the oil or the wine, you're chayav kares for pigul. Okay, mishum pigul mipnei shedam hazevach matiran, because there's a relationship. You need there to be you need a matir. So the sprinkling of the blood of the korban permits those items likarev to be brought on the mizbeach. Now you're not eating them because they're poured into the mizbeach, but they're permitted to be poured in the mizbeach. Okay, Divrei Rabbi Meir says, Amrulo. So the Chachamim said to him, V'alo adam mevi zvachav hayom ve'et misachim mikan v'asara yamim. You know, the rule is that if you have to bring the wine and the oil with your korban, if you don't bring it that day, it's okay. bring the animal, come back in a few days, up until 10 days, and you can bring the wine and the oil later.
So how can I make it bigger 10 days later?
That's the point. So the Chachamim say it can't, because the wine and the oil are not related to the blood, because once it's not that same day, that they're not related.
If it's after the same one day, it should be invalid.
So the point is that since it's not, you see that the blood is not what's permitting the oil and the wine. So therefore, why should the oil and the wine become pigul? So Amar lehen, to which Rabbi Meir says, Af ani lo amarti ela boin im hazebach. You're right, that's true. If the oil and the wine comes 4 days later, you're right, then it's not pigul. But if it does come on the same day, then it is. Right? The Chum say, no, but that's the rule. They're clearly not attached. If you can bring it later, then bringing it on that same day is also not pigul, because they're not attached, because you can bring it later. Rabbi Meir says they're attached when they're attached, and they're not attached when they're not attached. Okay, so now we have a conflict in this brayso. It starts off, it's Rabbi Meir's opinion, and then it goes to Rabbi An's opinion. So Rav Yosef explains, Hamani, whose opinion is this? This is This is Rebbe's opinion. Third opinion that we had not seen, right? We thought it was only the Rabbanan. We thought it was we thought it was Rabbi Meir. This is actually Rebbe's opinion. He has a third position. To Omar lug shemen shamatura matnosav sharule. He holds that the lug of oil, it's not the blood of the korban asham that permits it. If the blood of the asham was permitting it, then the Rabbanan, right? Then you have an issue, because the Rabbi Meir would say that's pigul, but the Chachamim would disagree. It's not connected, right? Because you could bring the lug of oil later. So he says, but according to Rabbi, the applications of the oil onto the Metzora himself is the permitter of the rest of the remainder of the oil. Therefore, it's a davar sheish matirin. It's not the blood of the osham that's the matir, that's the permitter. It's the oil itself when it gets placed on the. Remember, the Metzora's got to stick his hand in the right. He's standing. Where's our picture? Right. Since we've got our pictures, right? The Metzora is standing right here on these top of the stairs, sticks his hand into the Azara, and the coin's there, and he touches his thumb and his toe and his ear, right? That permits the rest of the oil. So it's davar sheish matirin, so there's a pigul. Okay? Since the matanos make the rest of it permissible, then it can also make it pigul. Okay. But when it comes to the other types of oil for korban, he would agree that with the Rabbanon that says that you can't. Those are not permitters. Titanya, as we ordered in a brayso. Lug shemen shel metzora, the oil, the lug of shemen of the metzora, moa linbo ad sheyizrok hadam. You commit, let's say, you decide that you want to use that oil. Then you've committed me'ilah, because it's a part of a korban, until you throw the blood of the korban asham. Once you throw the blood of the korban asham, now the oil becomes permitted, and you can use it. Nizrak hadam lo nenin v'lo ma'ilin. Once the blood is thrown, so then, Midrabanan, you're not allowed to use it until you apply it to the thumb and to the toe, right? Midrabanan, but it's not really midorais, it's not me'il anymore. Okay. Rabbi disagrees. He says not so. Mo'alin ad shitin matnosav. It is aser midoraisa, it is Torah, it's me'il, it's still part of the korban until you make the applications on the metzora. That's the matir. The shavin, and they agree, she'aser ba'achila ad she'yitain matan sheva umatan bahonos. That everyone, they agree that you're not allowed to eat it, right? At least midrabanan, right? Until you're going to sprinkle it 7 times and also place it onto the thumbs of the metzora. Okay, Rabbi says according to Rabbi, that's a doraisa, right? That permits it. Now it's okay, but according to the Chachamim, it's still also midrabanan. Once you do the sprinklings, then everybody says it's okay. Okay, Amrua Kami de Rabbi Yirmiyah. So Rabbi Yosef, his idea that this is Rabbi's opinion, they brought this to Rabbi Yirmiyah. Amar, he said, Gava Rabba Rav Yosef Lema Ki Hai Milsa. What are you talking about? Somebody great like Rav Yosef said something so weird? That's not right. That's not right. It says, Hare, we're on Mem Dalar Mebez, Hare Lug Haba Bifnei Atzmo, Delekuli Yama Matnos of Sharule. Look, when it comes to the Metzora, if it comes by itself, right? Let's say he doesn't bring it together on the same day that he's bringing his Asham, and this Metzora brings the lug oil separately. Everyone agrees that the applications are the permitter, right? You can't do it's me'ila up until you make the applications. Ve lo mifaglinle. And nevertheless, there's no pigul. Right? It's a pigul according to those opinions. The times we're going to brisa. Log shemen shel mitzora, the oil of the mitzora. Chayavno of mishum pigul mipnei shadam matiro lebahonos div Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says if you bring it on the day as you're bringing the korban asham, like he holds generally, then it can be pigul because the blood application of the asham is permitting the oil from being used. Amru lo Rabbi Meir. They said to Rabbi Meir just like they said before by the Nesachim. How can you relate the Asham blood to the log when he could bring the log up to 10 days later? They're not connected. Amar lehen, to which he responds back, Afani lo amarti ela ba'im hasham. I'm only telling you that it could be pigul if it brought together with the Asham. So therefore, you see that there's no third. This is not. Rebbe's opinion relating to whether it's me'ila or not me'ila doesn't have anything to do with whether it's pigul or it's not pigul. So, therefore, you can't answer this brisa according to Rabbi Yosef. So Rabbi Yirmiyah gives his own answer. Ella Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Liolam Rabbi Meiri. This brisa is all Rabbi Meir's opinion. V'sami mikan nesachim, and you have a typographical error. Take the Nesachim out. Rabbi Meir doesn't say that you can't do Me'ila by Nesachim. He says you can. So therefore, it's going to be all Rabbi Meir. Amar Abaye says, Liolam lo tisame. Don't take that phrase out. Vitana, and you have to teach it like this. The Tana is talking about like this. Lug haba'im ha'asham. The Tana at the beginning is talking about, it's all Rabbi Meir's opinion. If you bring the lug together with the asham, then it would be the same rule if you brought the Nesachim with the Korban according to Rabbi Meir, you'd be chayev for pigul. The hadr, then the later on when he says you're not chayev, that's where he's Tana Nesachim haboim b'fnei atzman. That's when you're bringing the Nesachim by themselves, where even Rabbi Meir agrees that you're not chayev in that case. Hu adin lelog habab b'fnei atzman. That would be the case by the lug also that comes by itself. You're not chayev. So therefore, that's how you're ordering the brisa. The first part of the brisa is talking about when it comes with the korban. Second part is when it doesn't come with the korban. Okay, next part of the Mishnah says, Chatas ha'of doma matrios b'sara lekohanim. The bird chatos, the blood when it gets applied to the mizbeach, permits the meat of the bird to be eaten by the kohanim. Minoni mili. How do we know that chatas ha'of is eaten by kohanim after the malika? After all, the process of malika is. You take the bird, you take its feet, you put it between these two fingers. You take the wings, you put it between these two fingers and hold it down. Take the head and restrain it with your left hand, right? Now you're holding the bird in this hand. Take your thumb, which is a long and sharp thumbnail, and then you insert it into the back of the bird's neck. That's the shechita of the bird. That's not kosher shechita.
If you didn't carry nails by then.
Right, but I used to grow my thumbnail long when I was a Rebbe, right? Yep.
Is that right? Really?
Yeah. My wife thought it was gross, so I didn't do it. But
Funny thing is, the guy who did that is also a butcher.
there you go.
He's a butcher and he's a Kohen.
So that's perfect. He's ready to go.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll be the coin who catches the ball. Less skilled position. Okay. So minani mili. So where do we know that a coin can eat it? After all, it's not shchita. Detani Levi. Levi taught as follows in a brisa. Kol karbonam, right? Pasuk says, well, we'll read the whole pasuk. Zeyeh lecha mikodesh hakadashim min ha'esh. Kol karbanam lechol minchasam lechol chatasam lechol hashamam asher yeshivu li kodesh karashim lechahu uvanecha. This is talking about the presents that Aaron HaKohen gets, right? He says, you're going to get from all of these korbanos, right? From the fires of the Mizbeach, all of the minchas you're going to get from all of their meal offerings. You're going to get all of their sin offerings, all of their guilt offerings. You're going to get all of these holy offerings to you and your children. Now, we're going to go through this pasuk, a lot of extra words in there. Kol korbanam l'rabas log shemen shamatzorah. All of their karbanos comes to tell us that extra log of oil that the mitzorah brings, that's a gift to the kohen, right? Thank you very much for bringing this log and making me kodesh. You get to keep the oil. Salka daitoch amina. I would have thought that the pasuk says mina eish kasav rachmana. The pasuk says that it's talking about only those things, those offerings that come from the fire, right? This is where we talk about only those things that are burned. The oil is not burned on the mizbeach. V'haylav mosar ha'ishu. This oil has no, not everything that's a korban has to do with fire. This log of oil is not brought into fire. Kamash malan. Therefore, its call comes to include also this lug that has nothing to do with the fire. Now, Torah says l'chol minchasam, for all of their korban minchas, l'rabos minchas omer or minchas knos, in order to also tell me that it includes the korban mincha of the omer, right? It's a barley offering, the first offering that is brought the second day of Pesach, right? Then we start counting the omer. Right, that's korban omer. So it was a barley offering, it was a meal offering. So the leftovers kohen eats, and the mincha of the knos. That is the offering when you suspect your wife of adultery, right? So you're going to bring a mincha offering together with the mesa, with the waters of the sota she's going to drink. That's called the minchas knos. The kohen eats the extras of those as well. Well, why would you think not? Because salkadaitach, I would have thought asher kupar bahem. The pasuk tells us by kodshim, the kohen gets to eat that which a person has been atoned with. So these, the minchas omer lahatir asya. Minchas omer is not a forgiveness offering. It is the offering that permits us to eat the previous year's wheat. Right? Up until that point, all the wheat that grows, you store it. Once you bring the korban omer, now everything is yashan, and you can bring out last year's wheat, and you're good. So it has nothing to do with atonement. And minchas knos levar avam kasya. The minchas knos of the sota, this has nothing to do with a kapara. It's just because you're trying to clarify whether she did an avera or not. It's a clarification offering. So therefore, maybe the kohen wouldn't eat those. Kamash malan. Therefore, the pasuk says kol minchos, that also all the minchas the kohen's going to get. Then it says l'chol chatasam, all of the sin offerings. L'rabos chatas of, that's going to include the burnt offering, because salka daita chamina would have thought nevelahi. It is nevela, but it is not. Then we continue on, as long as we're on a roll. L'chol ashamam, all of their guilt offerings. L'rabos asham nazir for asham mitzorah, to include that the kohen gets the parts of the asham for the korban that the nazir brings, and the guilt offering that the mitzorah brings. Because salkotay techamina, I would have thought to have said lahachshir kasu. All of these things do is they permit the nazir to not be a nazir anymore. They permit the mitzorah from being finished from being a mitzorah. They're not an atonement. Kamash malan. No, the kohen gets that too. Okay, well, problem with that is asham mitzorah behed yiksiv bey. If you look at the parsha in the Torah that talks about the asham of the mitzorah in Vayikra Perak Yud Dalet, it says ki kachatos ha'asham hu lakohen. It's like the asham is like the chatos. It goes to the kohen. I don't need a pasuk to tell me. It's clear. It's written it's written there. Ella. So rather, you're right. L'rabos asham nasir asham mitzorah. You're right. The pasuk is telling us that the asham nazir, the asham mitzorah also goes to the kohen. The asham nazir we wouldn't need to because it's already written, but we don't know the asham mitzorah. Okay, the pasuk says at the end, asher yashivu zeg gezel hager. You know what else goes to the kohen? That which is returned, which means when somebody steals from a convert, if somebody steals something from anybody, they have an obligation to return it. Let's say the person dies, then you have an obligation to return it to his heirs. Let's say the person is correct. Let's say the person is a convert and he has no heirs. So where does the money go? So the answer is lecho, goes to the kohen. Right? You give it to the kohen as a present. It is yours, so much so you can even marry a wife with it because it's really yours. Okay.
How do you normally shaft a bird? Not with malika. How do you normally?
Normally, right? Here's, let's say, this is our bird.
You're an artist.
You are going to shecht it here in the front. Malika is a nail right there in the back.
You're a good artist there.
Yeah.
Yeah, how's Rabbi? Okay. Tanya, we learned in a brisa as far as going back to talk about everything there is to talk about those chatos that are brought inside. Rabbi Elazar Omer. Rabbi Elazar says, Mishum Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says, Pigel. Right? If the Kohen has an intent of pigel, bedavar hanase bechutz, on part of the avoda, which is supposed to be done outside in the azara, pigel, then that will cause the korban to become pigel. Bedavar hanase befnim, but if he has in mind that he's going to do something outside of the right time, and it's part of the service which is supposed to be done inside of the Beis HaMikdash, lo pigel, then that's not pigel according to Rabbi Elazar Mishum Rabbi Yossi, right? Kate Sod, what are we talking about? How does this work? Haya omeid bachutz. He was out in the azara, and he's about to do shchita. Ve'omar, and he says, Hareini shochet lahazos midamo lamachar. I am going to sprinkle the blood tomorrow. Lo pigel. That is not pigel, because that blood service is done inside the Beis HaMikdash, and it's not like a shlamim. Shemachshava bachutz kedavar nasa befnim, right? Because that thought is about something which is going to be done inside. So lo pigel, that's not pigel. Haya omad bifnim. Let's say he was standing inside. V'amar, and he said, Hareini mazeh al manas lahaktir murim lishpoch shirayim lamachar. I am going to sprinkle this blood on condition that I'm going to burn the fats, or I'm going to pour the blood into the base of the mizbeach tomorrow. Well, those are outside. Lo pigel. That doesn't count either. Why? Because he's standing inside the Beis HaMikdash, thinking about outside, but he can't do pigel while he's inside the Beis HaMikdash. Aval, however, if he was standing outside and he said, I'm about to do shchita, and I'm going to pour the blood into the base of the mizbeach, which is also an outside service, and I'll do it tomorrow, according to the opinion that says that it is required to be done. Or I'm going to burn the fats on the mizbeach. Pigel, that is pigel. That's where you can do pigel. Because he's thinking outside about something that's going to be done outside. Okay. So, Amar Rabbi Shub ben Levi says, my car, where's the pasuk that tells you that? So the answer is that by the Par Kohen Mashiach, right? This is by the bull that the Kohen Gadol brings back in our Perak Daled. Kasher Yuram Mishur Zevach Hashlamim, right? Just like you brought up the Zevach Hashlamim. So then you're supposed to burn the Emurim. Let's talk about the Emurim, right? The burned fats. You're supposed to burn them on the Mizbeach outside, just like you burn the fats of the Shlamim. So, question is, why are you bringing a shlamim into this? Just tell me, burn the fats on the mizbeach outside. You don't tell me like you did for the shlamim. Ella, so rather, makish para kohen mashiach l'shor zevach hashlamim. The pasuk is telling us these two things are now linked together. The bull that the kohen gadol brings and the shlamim are now linked together. Mashur zevach hashlamim achiu ma'asavu machshavosav al mizbeach achitzon. Just like a shlamim, its intents are all on the mizbeach, which is outside, and the burning, everything is on the outside. So everything is on the outside. Afpar kohen Mashiach. So also, if you want to be chayav in pigol, the bull of the kohen Mashiach, ad sheyihu machshavosav u'ma'asav al mizbeach achitzon. It has to be thoughts on the outside about service on the outside, and that's why the bull by the kohen gadol is connected to the shlamim. Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, Amar Rav Ravu in the name of Rav Ravu. Amar Rav in the name of Rav. Halacha Rabbi Elazar, Shamar Mishum Rabbi Yossi. That's the halacha. That's the halacha. The Gemara says, well, 1 second. Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, this is a great line. Hilchasul Mashiach. Well, you tell me that's the halacha. Mashiach's not here. Nobody's bringing the korbanos. Thank you for telling me what the halacha is. I don't care what the halacha is. I'm not doing it tomorrow.
Why are you telling me this?
Why are you telling me this? So Abaye says, Elamayata, if you're so worried about that, Kol Shchitas Kochim Lo listening, why are we learning any of this Masechta? Right? The whole Masechta is irrelevant. I'm not bringing anything. Hilchasol Lemeshicha. It's halachos for Mashiach comes. So Ella, so no. Drosh v'kabel schar. The whole reason why we're doing this is because we're learning for the sake of learning. It's the highest level. So then we're learning for the sake of learning. So Hachanami, Josh for Kabbalah Schar. So what are you so worried about? The fact that he tells us this is the halacha. Learn it, he'll get a reward, right? So no, Hachi Kamin Alach. This is what I mean. Hilcha Salam Ali. I don't need you to tell me what the halacha is. Learning it, I get. You don't tell me what the halacha is. I could understand. There's this shita, there's this shita. It doesn't matter. Practically, I don't need to know what the halacha is. Lishna Achrina or Amarle halacha ka'imna. I am astonished. I'm astonished that you would establish a halacha when it's not something which is done bisman hazen in practical. Okay. So next Mishnah, kadshe ovde kochavim. Now let's say a non-Jew brings a korban. Non-Jews can bring korbanos also. So a non-Jew brings a korban. Ein chayavin lehem mishum pigul no sarvitame. So there is no way to be chayav in pigul, nosar, or tuma.
What type of korban does the non-Jew bring anyway?
He's going to bring like a korban ola kind of a situation, right? Because he can't eat it, right? There's no eating of the korban, so his korban is basically going to be like an ola.
All the korban is always an ola?
Yes. Yeah. Non-Jews are always going to bring olas. They can't eat it. Cannot eat them. Vashochtan bachutz pater. Also, if you shecht their korban outside of the Beis HaMikdash, you are exempt from kares for shchitas chutz. Divrei Rabbi Shimon. So Rabbi Shimon says, and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yossi says that you are chayav in all of these cases, right? That a non-Jew's korban are just like the rules apply, the same as a Jewish person's korban, as far as pigul, nosar, all of these rules. Okay, so now we got to have some sources for this. Tana Rabbanan, Rabbi's word. Ovdei kochavim lo nenin velo mo'ilin. So the korbanos of non-Jews. So you can't get any benefit from them, but there's no prohibition of me'ilah if they declare them. So whenever we see that there's no me'ilah, but you're not allowed to get benefit, it usually means that it's derabanan, right? Rabbinically, we're going to treat it like it's kodesh, but in reality, it's not. That's why you're not chayav me'ilah. You're not going to bring a korban ashram if you violate that, and you're not getting lashes if you violate it. Okay. You're also not going to be liable if you have pigul intent. No sar. Also, if you leave it over to the next day and you eat it, you're also not chayav for that. V'tamei, and also if the korban becomes tamei, so you're also not going to be liable for that. Vein osen timura. Also, if a person comes along and says, "I'd like to exchange this animal for that animal," the new animal is not a timura. Right? It doesn't cause the tumor, because this animal of the non-Jew seems to be like the hektish of it is a much lower level, right? None of these rules apply to it. Vein mevi nesachim. They also don't bring any nesachim together with it. Aval korbanon to'on nesachim, right? I'm sorry, they can't bring nesachim by themselves, but their korbanos do come with nesachim, right? If they're bringing a korban, right, they bring us in an animal, then we need to supply the nesachim to go with it. Divrei Rabbi Shimon. That's what Rabbi Shimon says. Amar Rabbi Yossi says, Roe ani bekulon lahachmir. He says, actually, I think you should be strict in all these cases. You can't commit me'ilah, you can't eat its tuma, you can't nosar. All of these rules apply, as he learns in the Mishnah, right? Rabbi Yossi said they're your chayav. Shenemar bahen, because the pasuk says la Hashem. Right, that by the korban is that the pasuk that we learn this from is by the non-Jews. It says ish bi beis Yisrael umin hager bi Yisrael, any man, whether he's Jewish or he's a convert Jewish, asher yakriv korbano, that brings his korban, lekol nidrehem, for all of their oaths, ulechol nidvosam asher yakrivu laHashem lola, that it goes to Hashem. So this pasuk which says ish, which implies any human being, not just Jews. So then it goes la Hashem, it belongs to Hashem. Okay, so now, b'medvar mamurim, b'kodshe mizbeach. This is only when we're talking about when the non-Jew declares something eligible for a sacrifice, because then that pasuk applies. You're making into a korban la Hashem. Aval b'kodshe bedek habayis mo'alin bahen. But let's say the non-Jew dedicates something to the Beis HaMikdash to be used for its financial support. There's no me'ilah for that. That he agrees there's no me'ilah, because that's not a korban. He only says the korbanos are la Hashem. Okay. Lo nenin v'lo mo'ilin. So we don't get benefit, but there's no me'ilah. So let's discuss it. Lo nanin midrabanan, as we said, you're not going to allow to get any benefit midrabanan velo mo'ilin, but there's no me'ila midoraisa. Why? De gemar me'ila chet mitruma, because me'ila, the rule of me'ila, we're going to learn from the fact that the word chet is written by me'ila, and the word chet is written by truma. So, de truma ksiv, by truma it says b'nei Yisrael v'lo avdei kochavim. Truma can be separated by Jews and not non-Jews. So therefore, since the word chet is written by truma and it applies to Jews, not non-Jews, so to me'ila is a prohibition that only applies to Jewish korbanos, not non-Jewish korbanos. Ve'ein chayav no mishum pigol, nosar v'tamei. Now also no pigol, no nosar, no tamei. My taima. Why is that? Dalsi pigol avon minosar. The reason is because pigol is a gzera shava from nosar, right? So we're going to eventually get to pigol here. So that is learned from nosar. Right? Avon. That's the Gzera Shava that we learned that one. Okay? Then, Vasi Nosar, and Nosar is Chil Chilu Mituma. And Tuma says Chil. So there's a Gzera Shava there. So Tuma, Gzera Shava to Nosar. Then Nosar, Gzera Shava to Pigol. So the rule, once I know that Tuma applies to Jews and not non-Jews, so then all of them follow. So, and ubetuma, so therefore by tuma ksiv it says b'nei Yisrael v'lo avdei kochavim. It says it applies to Jews, not non-Jews. So therefore tuma, nosar, and pigol. Good. Ve'enos and tamura, can't make a tamura. My taima, what's the reason why not? The iskish tamura lemaiser behema, because tamura is going to be compared to the 10th animal. Lemaiser behema iskish lemaiser dagon, and maiser behema is now compared to the tithing of wheat, right? So again, we're gonna have one of these. Imagine it again, right? By meiser of wheat, by meiser dagon ksiv b'nei Yisrael v'lo avdei kochavim. By tithing of wheat, right? The meiser sheni, that applies to Jews, not non-Jews. Then we have a hekish to compare it to tmura, and then we have another hekish that goes over and compares it to meiser behema, and then meiser behema compares it to tmura. Okay. Problem is, can you do that? Can you learn a pasuk? You're going to compare this to this, and then you're going to compare the next thing to the next thing. So you can't do that. That's a rule by kodshim. You can't compare and then compare again. So the answer is meiser dagon chulinhu. The answer is you can't if it's talking about kodshim, right? If you're talking about holy items, you can't make a hekish from one to the next. And just make it very clear, because I didn't read those psukim, and I usually do, right? The psukim, Tmura is compared to Meiser Behema in the pasuk that says, Ches, is here, V'lo yivaker bein tov l'ra v'lo yimirenu, v'im hamer yimirenu, hayahu tmuraso kodesh lo yigael. So that pasuk is talking about Tmura to Meiser Behema, and then we have Meiser Behema is going to Meiser Dagon. The next pasuk that says, the next pasuk says Lo yachifen lo yimkorek b'rav tov behema v'hayahu tmura so yekodesh. And the next one, so there and ser ta'aser it's called tfuah zarecha hayote hashana asara. So we're going to connect each of these one to the next, right? Tmura gets compared to Meiser Behema. Meiser Behema gets compared to Dagon, but you can't do two-step comparisons when you're in Kodshim. The answer is you're not, because you're going from Maser to Meiser Dagon, which is wheat, to Meiser Behema. Then you're going from there to Tmura. Well, that's two steps. You can't do that. Well, this is not Kodshim. Since that's not Kodshim, this first jump isn't a Kodshim jump. This is a Kodshim jump. You only have one Kodshim jump. That's okay. You can't have two Kodshim jumps. But if the first item is not Kodshim, you can get away with it. That's what they suggest. Yeah, but that's a machlokas, obviously, right? You can't whether you consider if the first item is chulin is not kodshim, whether that's considered a jump, because that's fine. How are you going to determine if this comparison is kodshim or not? The answer is you go by the malami, the thing that's teaching it to you. But what about the other side of that says no? In order for you to determine if this is a hekesh of kodshim, you look at this item, the one that it's taught to, which means that this is kodshim, then it's two steps. You can't do that. What are you going to say? Ella meiser behema chova she'en kavua lazman. The answer is meiser behema is an obligatory offering, although it doesn't have a specific day you have to bring it. You must bring your 10th animal. So therefore, so it's a chova she'en ba zman kavua. Yisrael maisu ovdei kochavim lai maisu, and that is not something non-Jews bring. Non-Jews bring presents. They're never obligated to bring a korban. Therefore, this meiser behema. We automatically know this belongs to Jews and not non-Jews. Therefore, forget this. You don't need this. Therefore, you're just going to learn one jump. That's why it's one jump, and it's okay. Then we said that they don't bring nisachim. Taner Rabbanon, Ezrach. It says Ezrach. It says that a naturally born Jewish person, or a Jewish person in this case even applies to a ger, right, brings nisachim. If he decides he wants to bring oil or wine as a gift to the Beis Hamikdash, he can. Ezrach mevi nesachim, but a non-Jew cannot. You might think that means also that when he brings his korban olah, he doesn't have to bring the oil or wine with it. Tamalomar kacha. Therefore, the pasuk says kacha. This is the way you bring an olah. Therefore, there's no second way to bring an olah. Even if a non-Jew is the one bringing it, he has to bring it with the nesachim. Amar Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says, Roa ani bechulin lahachmir. I think that you should be strict. Bamed devar mamurim bekodshim mizbeach. Right. That's when he's saying that he's talking about the kodshim mizbeach, those things that are sacrifices. But kodshim abedek habayis, the donations, that you don't have to worry about it. My time. What is the reason why he thinks that way? Kasavar ki gam meila chet mitruma dum yeda truma. He says, because remember, how did we know that Me'ilah didn't apply by non-Jews? He says Me'ilah doesn't apply by non-Jews because we learned it from Truma, from a Gzera Shava from Truma. Well, Truma is hektish, it's like Kodesh. So therefore, it has Kedushas Haguf. It has, the item itself is now holy, becomes Truma. About Kedushas Bedek Habayis, but that kedusha of that which is donated to the Beis Hamikdash, that is kedushas damim. That only has value. That's low. So therefore, he learns from truma over to me'ilah and says that me'ilah applies, but me'ilah only applies to the offering that is brought for that is brought as a korban. Taner Rabbanan, Rabbi's learn. Dam shenitma. Let's say you have blood that becomes tamei. V'zarku b'shogeg. And the blood is tamei. Now you had your korban. Somebody touched it, and now you're going to sprinkle it on the mizbeach. And you did it b'shogeg. You didn't realize. Hurtza. The korban's okay. Korban's valid. Why? Because we learned the tzitz. Right? Remember the kohen wears the tzitz. It's going to protect against tumah. So that's how we said is if you do it b'shogeg. Says we're on Mem Hamad base. Sorry.
Has there been a time when pissed off the system that you're...
They have to make them again, right? You have to have, right? You have to fix them. So, b'mezid, what the question that you're asking is a fair question. Question really is also, what if the tzitz is not being worn by the Kohen at the time, right? What if, right? So, the answer to that is, hang on, the Gemara is going to discuss all of those questions, right? It's good questions. B'mezid, if the Kohen did it on purpose, it became tamei and he did it anyway, lo hurtza. And that's not good. Why? Midrabanan. Midrabanan, we don't want the Kohen going out of his way and doing this betuma. That's not good. Pamedvar mamurim, what is that? B'yachid. That's if it's an individual person's korban. Aval betzibor, but if it's a community korban, be'b'shogi be'mezid hurtza. They didn't make a nisr darabanan and ruin a public korban. Ube'ovde kochavim, when it comes to a idol worship korban, be'b'shogi be'mezid, right? If he's shechtzer, if it comes to avodah zara,
but like, I know one guy like that's going and feel really good.
Sorry, but ovdei kochavim, a non-Jews korban, bein b'shogig, bein b'mezid, lo hurtza. Non-Jews korban, if the dam becomes tamei, then you can't bring it no matter what. So amrua rabbanan kamei derav papa. So the Rabbanan taught this teaching in front of Rav Papa. Come on, who's this like? Deloka Rabbi Yossi. It's clearly not like Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi is strict as far as non-Jews korbanos. So therefore, this idea that you're lenient by the non-Jews korban and it's not that the tumah. Right, he says that they're just like a Jewish person's korban. So he says not like Rabbi Yossi, dear Rabbi Yossi, Hamar Bakula, and he says that you have to be strict by all the korbanos and consider the non-Jews korban just like a Jewish korban. And here we're saying the non-Jews korban is not. Amar Rav Papa says no. Afilu Tim Rabbi Yossi. This could be Rabbi Yossi's opinion. Shani Hasam. That's different. Damar Kar. The pasuk says lahem, that tzitz works for you. Lahem v'lo lov de kachavim. Tzitz doesn't work for non-Jews, right? That's why it's specific law. Amar le Rav Huna, brother of Nosson, the Rav Papa. So Rav Huna, the son of Rav Nosson, says to Rav Papa, El me'ato, if what you're saying is true, asher heim makdishim, hachanami heim, then how are you going to explain which it says, that which they are making holy? So that means that means that the prohibition against a Jew eating when he's tamei tumas aguf, so that only applies to eating a korban when he's tamei, if he eats a Jewish person's korban, and not a korban velo of the kochav, not a non-Jew's korban, right? If he's tamei and he eats a holy out, we said he's chayv kares, but not if it's a non-Jew's korban, maybe, because it says asher heim makdishim, they Jews. So achinami heim velo of the kochavim. El Amar Ravashi. So Ravashi says, okay, fine, forget that drasha. Amar Kra, the pasuk says liratzon lahem, right? It shall be desired to you, and non-Jews, the reason why is that tzitz helps the korban be back assigned and valid to you. A non-Jew never has a connection to his korban in that way. Therefore, the tzitz cannot work for a non-Jew in the way that it works for a Jew. It's not just from the word lahem or from ham. It's that the tzitz cannot create a connection where one cannot exist. Okay, that's a very good place to start.